She did everything right, and still, she never made it home. The murder of Sarah Everard. London, March 2021. A quiet night, a familiar walk home, a route she trusted, lit by street lamps and the rhythm of the city. Sarah Everard did everything right. She stayed on the main road, stayed alert, stayed connected. But someone else was watching her that night, not from the shadows, but from behind a badge. This is the walk that should have ended safely, and the night that changed Britain forever. London at night can feel strangely familiar, a city wrapped in quiet lights, where the streets glow gold under the lamps and every corner seems to breathe in its own slow rhythm. On most evenings, nothing extraordinary happens. People go home, doors close, and the city settles into its usual hum. For 33-year-old marketing executive Sarah Everard, March 3rd was just another midweek night. She had spent the evening at a friend's flat, talking, laughing, unwinding, the kind of ordinary comfort that makes you forget the world outside. When she stepped out around 9 p.m., the air was cold but calm. Her walk home wasn't short, but it was familiar. She wasn't careless. She wasn't distracted. She spoke on the phone for a while, kept to the main streets, followed the same path she always took. There was no reason, no sign, no instinct that told her anything was wrong. But like so many women moving through the world, Sarah carried that quiet vigilance, the subtle awareness behind every footstep, the instinct to glance over a shoulder, the silent calculations about which street feels safer. What she couldn't have known was that someone else was watching that night, someone trained to protect the public, someone with the power to stop her, and a badge that could make any command sound legitimate. This is the story of a walk home that should have ended with a closed door, warm lights, and safety. But instead, it revealed one of the darkest truths a city can face. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from the shadows, it wears a uniform. Sarah left her friend's flat in the Clapham area just after 9 p.m., pulling her green jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stepped into the cool March air. The streets were quiet, not deserted, not unsafe, just normal. It was the kind of neighborhood where people walked their dogs, where porch lights stayed on, where the route home felt almost routine. Sarah knew this walk well. She had done it many times. At 9:13 p.m., she called her boyfriend as she walked. The conversation was casual, everyday things, nothing unusual. They spoke for roughly 14 minutes. There was no panic in her voice, no hint of discomfort. When the call ended at 9:27 p.m., everything still seemed perfectly ordinary. A woman walking home, a familiar path, a city where millions did the same thing every night. But somewhere along that route, the atmosphere shifted. CCTV cameras captured brief fragments of her journey. Sarah walking purposefully down the pavement, her pink hat visible under the streetlights, her steps steady and confident. Then, a few minutes later, another camera caught something else. A white seat, Leon driving slowly along the same road. It wasn't speeding, it wasn't reckless. It simply paced the street as if studying the world outside its windows. And then it braked. Hard. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like a routine police stop, a law enforcement vehicle pulling over a pedestrian during a period of strict COVID restrictions. Nothing about it appeared chaotic or violent, but Sarah wasn't out after a curfew. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was simply on her way home. This moment, these seconds caught on grainy CCTV, would soon become the hinge on which the entire country's trust would turn. Because that white car didn't just stop to ask a question. It stopped to take her. From here, nothing would ever be the same. The investigation into Sarah's disappearance began like any other missing person case. Officers retraced her steps, reviewed her route, and pulled every available CCTV recording along the path she should have taken home. At first, the footage revealed nothing unusual. Sarah walking with purpose, the steady rhythm of someone heading somewhere familiar. But then, one camera captured a sight that made every investigator lean in closer. A white seat Leon entered the frame. It wasn't just passing through. It slowed, then crept, then braked sharply near the pavement where Sarah was walking. The timestamp matched the exact window in which all communication with her stopped. The footage didn't show panic or struggle. Instead, it appeared disturbingly calm. A brief exchange. A figure gesturing toward the back seat. Sarah standing still as if listening to instructions. To anyone watching in real time, it would have looked like a lawful stop. A police officer addressing a pedestrian during a period of strict pandemic restrictions. The kind of moment most people wouldn't question. But the more investigators studied those frames, the more a pattern emerged. The car wasn't an ordinary civilian vehicle. It was registered to the Metropolitan Police, assigned to a unit responsible for guarding diplomatic buildings, a role meant to demand the highest trust. And the officer using it that night, Wayne Couzens, wasn't on duty. He wasn't conducting official business. He had no lawful reason to stop anyone. This was the moment everything shifted. Because the car didn't just stop Sarah, it took her away from the safety of her familiar route. It turned an ordinary walk into the opening scene of a national nightmare. Investigators realized something chilling. Sarah likely believed she was being arrested. She may have been shown a badge. She may have been told she was violating COVID laws, a believable claim in early 2021. The cameras didn't capture the words spoken, but they showed enough. A trusted symbol was used as a weapon. A uniform became a disguise. And from that point on, Sarah Everard was no longer walking home. She was in the back seat of a police officer's car, with no way to know he wasn't there to protect her. Before Sarah Everard's disappearance, the name Wayne Couzens meant nothing to the public. He was just another face behind a police uniform, a 48-year-old officer assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Unit, a division trusted with safeguarding government buildings, embassies, and high-risk locations across London. On paper, he held one of the most sensitive posts in British policing. But behind that badge, Couzens was unraveling. Investigators digging into his history found a trail of warning signs, red flags that had been reported, ignored, or left unresolved. He had been accused of exposing himself to women on more than one occasion. A McDonald's employee had filed a complaint just days before Sarah vanished, describing a man matching his appearance. There were whispers among colleagues about odd behavior, a darkness in his private life that didn't match the polished professionalism expected in his unit. Yet, none of these incidents stopped him from carrying a badge. None triggered a full investigation. None removed him from active duty. On the night of March 3rd, Couzens was not scheduled to work. He was alone, using a police-issued belt, handcuffs, and an official-looking identification card, tools that gave him instant authority in a city under COVID restrictions. It was a moment he had orchestrated, the culmination of a fantasy he had been edging toward for months. After Sarah was reported missing, detectives traced the white seat Leon directly to him. When officers arrived at his home, Couzens tried to play the role he knew best, calm, compliant, confident. He claimed he had nothing to do with Sarah's disappearance. Then his story shifted. He said he had been involved with a gang of Eastern Europeans who forced him to participate. Minutes later, he changed the story again. The lies multiplied, but none made sense. As officers searched his property, the truth began to crystallize. There were scratches on his hands, burn marks on discarded items, suspicious cleaning supplies, and eventually, forensic evidence that connected him directly to Sarah. For investigators, one realization cut deeper than all the others. This wasn't a random predator. This wasn't a man pretending to be a police officer. This was a police officer, one entrusted with extraordinary powers, who used the very symbols of public safety as bait. Wayne Couzens wasn't hiding behind the system. He was thriving inside it. And on that night, he weaponized every ounce of authority he had. Once Sarah was inside the back seat of the white Seat Leon, she was no longer free. From the moment that door closed, investigators later concluded, she was under the complete control of Wayne Couzens. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a brief stop that escalated. It was a deliberate abduction carried out by a police officer who used his badge to make every command sound legitimate. CCTV footage and automatic number plate recognition data allowed detectives to reconstruct almost the entire timeline. After stopping Sarah around 9:30 p.m., Couzens drove out of London, leaving the familiar lights of Clapham and heading toward the county of Kent, more than an hour away. The entire route showed no signs of hesitation, no detours, no struggling visible from the outside. Everything about the drive suggested he had planned this. What investigators discovered later was even more disturbing. In the hours leading up to the abduction, Couzens had been searching for violent, degrading material online, escalating fantasies that converged into the crime he was about to commit. What happened in the time after he left London and before sunrise the next morning became clear only through Couzens' partial admissions and forensic evidence. Sarah Everard was murdered on the night she was taken. She did not survive the first hours of captivity. The likely cause of death: strangulation. There was no prolonged disappearance, no days of uncertainty. Sarah was killed shortly after being forced into that car. Couzens then spent the night attempting to cover his tracks. He purchased fuel, cleaning supplies, and returned to Kent again, not as a police officer heading to work, but as a man trying to hide what he had done. In the early morning, he drove to a remote woodland area near Ashford, a place he knew well. There, he disposed of Sarah's body and attempted to destroy evidence by setting it on fire. At the time, her friends were messaging her in panic, and her family was calling her phone over and over. Sarah was already gone. The horrific truth is that the moment Couzens stopped her on that London street, her fate was sealed within hours. Investigators would later describe this case as one of the most calculated abuses of police power in modern British history. A crime committed not by someone pretending to be a police officer, but by someone trusted to protect the public. From 9:30 p.m. to the early hours of the morning, Sarah's life was taken, hidden, and erased from the world she should have returned home to. For days, officers and volunteers searched for any sign of Sarah. Her phone, her clothes, anything that could point to what happened after she vanished from the streets of Clapham. The investigation was growing by the hour, and once Wayne Couzens became the primary suspect, detectives expanded their search radius far beyond London, Kent, the county where Couzens lived, worked, and spent most of his off-duty time. Quickly became the focus. He knew its isolated lanes, its quiet woodlands, its abandoned paths better than most people. And when investigators reviewed his movements on the night of the abduction, their fears hardened into certainty. If Sarah was no longer alive, this was where he would have taken her. On March 10th, nearly a week after she disappeared, a police search team entered a wooded area near Ashford, close to an abandoned builder's yard. It was remote, silent, and easy to miss unless you knew exactly where to look. Officers noticed disturbed ground, charred debris, and material that looked out of place in the natural landscape. Moments later, they made the discovery that confirmed the worst. The remains they found were burned, and they belonged to Sarah Everard. Forensic teams worked carefully, collecting every trace, every fragment that could speak for Sarah when she no longer could. Despite the damage, investigators were able to identify her through dental records and personal items found nearby. When police informed Sarah's family, the words they had hoped never to hear became final. Their daughter, who had simply been walking home, had been murdered and left in a remote woodland, miles from the life she should have returned to. The discovery broke the last piece of hope the country had been holding on to. What had started as a missing person case was now unmistakably a homicide. One committed with planning, calculation, and the misuse of authority. Sarah hadn't run away. She hadn't gotten lost. She hadn't vanished without a trace. She'd been taken, killed, and hidden by a man sworn to protect people like her. In the days that followed, the search site became a silent memorial. Flowers appeared at the entrance, notes were tied to branches. People who had never met Sarah stopped to stand in the stillness, shaken by the idea that a woman could do everything right, stay on a main road, keep in touch, walk a familiar route, and still not make it home. The truth was now clear. But one final question remained. Would Wayne Couzens finally tell the truth? When officers arrived at Wayne Couzens' home to arrest him, he tried to hold himself together, the calm, collected posture of a trained police officer. But inside the interrogation room, it didn't take long for the facade to fracture. At first, he denied everything. He claimed he didn't know Sarah. He said he had never seen her. He insisted he had no reason to be in the area where she disappeared. But detectives already had his car on CCTV. They had his phone data. They had the fuel receipts. They had the timeline. And they knew he had driven directly to the remote woodland in Kent, the same place where Sarah's remains were found. When cornered with these facts, Couzens switched to a second story. He claimed he'd been forced into the crime by a gang of Eastern Europeans. According to him, they had kidnapped his family, blackmailed him, and ordered him to abduct a woman at random. It was a desperate, incoherent lie. There was no gang. There was no threat. There was no evidence of any outside involvement, and investigators could see he was unraveling. As the hours passed, Couzens' explanations shifted again and again, each version contradicting the last. But one truth kept rising beneath the confusion. He alone was responsible. The forensics, the CCTV, the digital trail, the timeline, they all pointed to him. Eventually, confronted with the full scope of the evidence, Couzens admitted to the abduction. He acknowledged kidnapping Sarah under the false pretense of a COVID-related arrest. He admitted restraining her. But even in confession, he refused to fully face what he had done. He tried to distance himself from the murder, hinting, deflecting, obscuring. But forensic analysis of the scene in Kent and the condition of Sarah's remains told the truth he wouldn't say aloud. Sarah had been murdered the same night she was taken. Investigators described Couzens as emotionless, calculating, and disturbingly matter-of-fact. a man who had used the authority of his badge to lure a woman into compliance, then tried to use that same calm demeanor to talk his way out of the crime. But the interrogation made one thing crystal clear. Wayne Couzens was not a man caught in a moment of panic. He was a predator who planned his actions, carried them out, and then attempted to erase every trace of what he had done. The lies had shattered, the mask had fallen, and now the justice system was preparing to deliver one of the heaviest sentences a British court can give. Wayne Couzens' case moved through the British court system with unusual speed. The evidence against him was overwhelming. CCTV, digital tracking, forensic findings, and his own shifting, contradictory stories. There was no conspiracy, no outside force, no gang controlling him. It was a crime committed entirely by one man who had both the power and the opportunity to manipulate the trust placed in him. When Couzens finally stood before the court, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping, rape, and the murder of Sarah Everard. Yet even that admission did little to ease the outrage spreading across the country. The judge made it clear. This was not a moment of remorse. This was a man cornered by evidence so airtight he had no choice but to confess. And then came the sentence. Wayne Couzens was given a whole life order, the heaviest penalty in the British legal system. No minimum term, no possibility of parole, no future review. He would never be released from prison. This sentence is rare, reserved for the most severe crimes in the UK, usually involving terrorism, serial murder, or acts of exceptional brutality. But the judge explained why Couzens' case met that threshold. He had abused the very authority meant to protect the public. He used his badge, his training, and his police powers as weapons. He targeted a woman who had every reason to trust him. And he shattered the sense of safety not just for Sarah, but for women across the entire country. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Sarah's family listened, holding on to each other. Surrounded by grief, no punishment could fully heal. Couzens, meanwhile, stood still, emotionless, offering no apology that could undo what he had done. The judge's final words echoed beyond the walls of the court. This was a case that threatened the integrity of policing itself, a crime that struck at the heart of public trust. Outside, the reaction was immediate. People gathered for vigils, signs filled the streets. She was just walking home. Women shared their own stories of fear. Nighttime routes changed, keys clenched in fists, messages saying, "Text me when you get home." And a country asked all at once how such a crime could happen at the hands of someone sworn to serve and protect the justice system had spoken. But the sentence, heavy as it was, could not erase the impact. There was still one final chapter, the echo Sarah's story left behind. In the days after Wayne Couzens was sentenced, something shifted across Britain. The story of Sarah Everard had already spread far beyond London, but now it took on a deeper, heavier weight, not just a tragedy, but a reckoning. Candlelit vigils appeared in cities and small towns alike. Women gathered not only to honor Sarah, but to speak the truths they had carried in silence. The fear of walking home, the practiced caution, the keys between fingers, the "call me when you get there," rituals that had never been enough. Across memorials, one sentence kept returning on handwritten notes. She did everything right. She walked on a main road. She talked to someone on the phone. She wore bright clothing. She stayed in public view. She followed every rule society tells women to follow. And still, it wasn't enough to keep her safe from someone wearing a badge. The shock wasn't only in what had happened, but who had done it. A police officer, not impersonating one, not disguising himself, a real officer, using real authority, exploiting the assumptions people are taught to trust. It forced the country to look directly at a terrifying question. If the person you're supposed to call for help becomes the threat, who protects you then? Public confidence in policing trembled. Protests filled the streets. Women demanded change, not in whispers, not in private conversations, but openly, loudly, collectively. Sarah's name became a symbol, not because she chose it, but because what happened to her exposed a truth too many recognized. Safety is not guaranteed, even when you follow every rule. Her family asked for one thing: to remember Sarah not only for the tragedy, but for the life she lived. A warm-hearted daughter, sister, friend, someone who loved nature, wanted fairness, and cared deeply for the people around her. They carry her memory in quiet ways. The world carries it in louder ones. As for Couzens, the walls of a life sentence cell are now the only place he will ever see again. But the damage he caused stretches far beyond the bars that hold him. He didn't just take Sarah's life, he broke something much larger: the fragile belief that authority always equals safety. And rebuilding that trust is a task no court sentence can complete. And so the story ends where it began, with a woman walking home. A path she should have completed, a door she should have opened, a night that should have been ordinary. But some truths survive only in echoes. And this one asks a question no society can ignore. When trust is shattered, how do we begin to feel safe again? She did everything she was supposed to do. She walked a familiar road in a city she trusted. But her story exposed a truth too many already knew: safety isn't guaranteed, not even under a badge. What part of her story stayed with you tonight? Next on True Echoes. In our next story, we leave the streets of London and step into a quiet New Jersey neighborhood where an ordinary house received a letter that changed everything someone was watching. And to this day, no one knows who. The truth coming soon on True Echoes. Stories don't end, they echo. Tonight's truth will stay with each of us in a different way. What spoke to you? Leave your thoughts below. And when you're ready, follow the trail into the next chapter and step into the echoes of truth.